Welcome to the Business of Family, the podcast where we explore the stories, challenges, and opportunities of family businesses. I'm your host, Tammy Buss, and I'm a family business survivor, and I'm also a family business advisor. In this show, we'll be talking with family business leaders and experts to bring you insights and inspiration so you too can survive your family business journey. Whether you're a founder, a successor, a professional, or just curious about family business, this podcast is for you. So today our guests are brothers, Yannick and Greg, who were co-owners and founders of Between the Lines, a winery in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And I want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name right. It's Wertsch. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Pretty close. It's Welch. Be the
Welch.
last
Okay.
name.
Yeah, the accent. I'm not very good at the accent, so we're going to just leave it as Greg and Yannick.
Works
So
for me.
So let's start a little bit by telling me the background of how, as brothers, you decided to start a winery.
Well, the first part we can't do much about, being brothers.
Yeah, I get that. Yes.
But we did actually grow up on a family farm in Niagara-on-the-Lake. So it actually started as a vineyard, right? And my brother and I were driving tractors, doing some of the field work, pruning, tying, whatever else necessary in the winery. And then for some strange reason, we actually thought when we were 18 or 19 or so that we would go off to university and do something different because we've just about had it with family. But decided for some weird reason halfway through, at least I did through my studies, that I didn't want to stay in this wine industry that I really, really love, that I'm passionate for. So I decided to study wine business in Germany, actually, and I was fully banking on going to Australia or Chile or somewhere where the big wineries are. Obviously, being young and sort of ambitious and all that sort of stuff. But when I came back to the farm, we basically looked at it and said, you know what, Niagara's got a lot of stuff going for it right here. We have a lot of tourism. We have a great growing area. We have a vineyard already with buildings on it and all that sort of stuff. And oddly enough, my brother was actually studying viticulture and winery tech at Niagara College at this point. So even though he decided that he wanted to do something different too, and then we actually sort of discuss the idea of maybe we do keep this whole thing in the family instead of splitting it up, and apply what we learned abroad and in Niagara and just apply it and build our own winery.
So you actually had a farm which was growing the grapes. So how
Yeah.
did that evolve? So that was your parents who started that, or does that go back even more generations?
No, so our parents moved the family to Canada to this farm in 1998. And at that point, they started growing grapes and supplied the larger wineries with grapes.
Okay, so they were a grower, they weren't
They were
actually in the
grape growers.
production.
Yes.
So you took that business and then moved it into the actual production side.
Yes.
So do you still have that farm? Are your parents still involved in that farm?
Yeah, so dad's still around, would help with some of the maintaining farm equipment and whatever he feels like he wants to help out at this point instead of having to do stuff. And our
Right.
mom does the same thing. She will do restaurant sales of our products, or she actually does her own little farmers market in Ridgeway, like close to Fort Erie.
Right.
Right.
Now, are you the only siblings or do you have additional brothers or sisters?
We have one more sister.
Yeah.
She's,
And is she involved?
No, she's the only one that made the jump away from the business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to go back and see the evolution of how you got from the farm that you grew up on with the wine to producing your own. So did you buy the farm from your parents? Is it the land still theirs and the production is yours? So how did that work from an evolution perspective?
So basically, Niagara, a lot of the farms, there are some farms that are exclusive farms, but a lot of them have residences and stuff on it as well, right? So you have the
Yes.
farmhouse plus the vineyard operation on it. So we couldn't really, at the end of university or college, we didn't have the money left to go offer our parents a great pitch and say, listen, it's time for you guys to get off the farm. We want to take this over. So we actually started differently. We actually got other jobs. I started teaching at Niagara College for about 5 years. My brother was helping make wine as well. And we basically rented the the farm building off our parents, like the barn. We
Mm-hmm.
found actually somebody, oddly enough, he became a great friend. It was an investor first, but became a great friend. So we were able to convince somebody to invest a little bit of money in two young guys that wanted to start their own winery. And this guy, Jim, actually didn't drink. He drank like
Oh,
the odd Coors Light, but
yeah,
his usual drink of choice was Diet Pepsi,
yeah.
which he loved, right? And so he actually gave us a little bit of starting money that we're able to pay rent. We bought grapes off our parents. We basically spent all that money on the hard assets like buying tanks and the presses and all
Mm-hmm.
the equipment and glassware. So there was nothing left to pay wages. So my brother and I
Yeah.
looked elsewhere to actually sort of
Live.
live. Yeah.
Well, there's so much startup costs, right?
Oh yeah.
Like,
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
yeah. No, fortunately, you had the some of the grapes from your parents already,
Yep.
so that was good.
Yeah.
But being a new business, it's so expensive to get started, and particularly in the wine growing business or wine producing business, right?
Yeah, well,
Huge cost.
the wine business too, there is basically your fundamentals of a farm business, but you also have manufacturing like winemaking on it, and then on top of that, you're actually almost in the entertainment industry at the same time,
Right,
right? So it's not like you need a specific set of skills. You need to be pretty much an all-rounder from farmer to entertainer, right?
right,
You're
right.
so there's a lot of interesting stuff. But like for us, one of the things you're right, we had a vineyard and vineyard experience to get started with. We had probably between the two of us almost 10 years of university and college and state schools for winemaking and wine business background. We had the work ethic to get this all going as well. Right. So for me, for example, like my best thing was best anecdote from then was that I would basically drive tractors in the morning, get changed, run over to the college, teach a class, get changed again, come in, work with my brother in winemaking, and then got to get changed again and hop on the tractor and finish the field work until I'm too tired to see the rows. Right.
Yeah. Well, that's a typical entrepreneur, right? I mean, the
Yep.
first years are hard. There's a lot of time and effort, which is why I think in a lot of cases that second generations or the next generations don't necessarily want to join the family business because they see how hard it is or how hard their parents worked to build that business, right? Because it's day and night when you're starting any kind of business. And you want a bit of a life, right? Because it's a passion of yours. It's not necessarily a passion of the next generation.
That is true.
Yeah.
But I think for us, obviously, the thing that keeps us going is the passion for this wine industry, right? I mean, and you can see it grow. And one of the unique things too is that you actually have people come to your place. They're normally in a good mood because they want to go and do wine tastings and they're not going
Yeah.
to lake, they're having a great time. And you can see that all the hard work that you put in, you're basically face to face with people that are enjoying it right in the moment. So that's actually very rewarding, right? So
Right.
it's a really great motivator um, um, in this industry. Obviously, it is a bit of a tough one, right?
Yes.
But it
Yes.
is
Well, to get
if
a
you
name, right? To get the quality, to get the name, you're competing against some big names, particularly in the just in the Niagara region alone, not including the rest of Canada or the rest of the world.
that is true. Yeah. No, but we also couldn't be by ourselves, right? Like, so the wine
Mm.
industry also, we have very unique equipment. We're on a really tight schedule sometimes because of weather, right? So
Yes.
if part of our equipment broke, we couldn't do it by ourselves. So
Right.
it's not just the winery and my brother and I and all that, but it's also the community here, different
Mhm.
growers and other wineries that helped us out in the beginning as well. If we were small and we maybe needed help with some of the equipment, they would
Right.
pitch in, and we've had a chance to pay that back in the meantime.
Hmm.
One of the most fun things is we've since then actually expanded to canning wines, and we're actually helping a
Oh.
lot of other wineries put their products into smaller servings, which has worked out tremendous, right?
Mm.
So
Well, they used to have those little Tetra Paks.
yeah,
Remember those
yeah,
little Tetra Paks? I don't think they have those anymore.
yeah.
I haven't seen them for a long time, but is that sort of the same thing, like sort of a one person serving?
Pretty much, yeah. So we just decided to take that bottle because we saw the writing on the wall a little bit that the dynamics are changing. Those big families are gone, or the people that live in the town and the uncle's just down the road, and people get together often backyard barbecue, and to open a bottle of wine with whatever 8 people is not an issue,
Hmm.
right? But we figured there's going to be a lot more singles or people maybe living by themselves or cohabiting or whatever else is going on. So we actually said, you know what, we have an opportunity here to try and bring Canadian products to more people instead of them not having access to it. And like I said, we've had help when we got started from other wineries. So when we bought it, we said, you know what, we're going to let others use this equipment too. We only had one condition, and that was you got to put good Canadian product in. Like we won't help anyone if it doesn't taste good. We don't want to,
Right.
flood the market with things where they go, oh, it's
We're so Canadian, right? We're just helping and thankful.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I got to just say a funny story about the Tetra Pak. So back in the day, so this is probably, I don't know, 25 years ago, I guess, maybe. Those Tetra Paks. So my girlfriend was putting her son's lunch together to take it to school. He was he was under like probably grade 4 or 5, somewhere in there, and they had juice boxes in the same packages as the wine. And didn't she throw in a wine in his lunch bag and got a call from the school?
That is
It's
funny.
like,
That's pretty funny.
oopsie. So be careful if it's canned and you're going to, we put it in canned juice versus a little can of wine. Be careful.
Yeah.
So anyway, I want to talk a little bit about the dynamics of the two of you working together. So again, you're brothers, and you started a new business. How do you divide up, sort of the workload? How do you work together with the dynamics of brothers? Because you can have different personalities. I know my boys are completely different. I wonder if they're, both my kids, other than they look like us. I don't know. They're so different.
Generally, it starts for us having the different educations already.
Right.
With me more focusing on winemaking, Greg focusing more on the wine business side of things. So in that sense, we already have different interests.
Mhm.
And in the end, for me at least, it's a matter of understanding what the other person's talking about, but then deferring to the expertise of
Mhm.
what they have already, right? So if Greg has something to talk about in terms of business strategy, and he explains it in a way that actually it makes sense, doesn't ramble on too much, then
Oh,
it
here we go. Here we
then
go.
I'll defer to his judgment. But it's the same thing in terms of the winemaking. If Greg says I need a certain wine in order to be able to sell it in the retail store, then he'll defer to me to be able to make sure that the wine that he's asking for is made properly and fits the criteria.
Right. So you basically stay out of each other's lane. You stay in your own lane and just make, your own side kind of work. So
Pretty much.
do you have your own teams then that you work with, or how does that work? Do
So
you like
we
meet like weekly? How do you actually, share that information?
Yeah, so we still have the traditional division here, basically, of the farm work, which we do some of the farm equipment driving, depending on who has time, because that's what we grew up with. That's almost like a nice little break. If you've been looking at
Yeah.
spreadsheets all week, and then you got a day where, like, you know what, I can be outside and I can just see the sun and then go through the vineyard and do a little bit of work that's not Excel.
Mhm.
That's amazing, right? So we basically divide that part up between the two of us, whoever more or less feels like it or has a chance to do it. But Yannick's right; he does most of the winemaking. I would do most of um, the business side of things. We do stay out of each other's lane, but we also work together. Like if whatever Yannick was sick for a week, all I need is basically him to say, okay, these two things need to get done, and I would be able to operate the equipment. But it's not like I want to stay in that side. I'm going to get out
Right. Right.
as soon as I have an opportunity again. That's probably been one of the biggest advantages for us is that we've had two ways to look at things and two heads to try and organize things just between the two of us as the founders and the leaders for the business. Always two perspectives, and we can bounce ideas of each other, but we're not both trying to push like the same thing,
Right.
right? We're pushing each has a corner, right, that they're
Right. Do you
pushing in.
do you bring your parents in at all to have discussions because of their, history of growing grapes? Do they come in to help with that sort of vision or mission or anything
So
like that?
with the fact that like now that we have the winery, the business actually grew to a point where the actual farming is not really left behind. I mean, it's still the pillars that we built everything on. We couldn't do it without, but there's a lot more decisions that are being made for the value add things instead of the yeah. So I don't want to say that we don't need their input. We still get their input, but we've been at this for 15 years now that we will need it less and less, basically, the more we go forward. And to be honest, it was not the easiest transition. That's probably one thing that does come up in the podcast as well, is maybe generational changes and all that sort of
Yes.
stuff.
The ability to let go.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that's usually a big issue with the first generation. So although that your parents had the farm and the grapes, they didn't do what you're doing. So it's a different business, but it's still tied together. And if you probably hadn't grown up with that, you wouldn't have started your own sort of entity of that, correct?
We still have some entertaining discussions about how accurate the tractor was driven down the row.
Oh,
And then I have to explain that the accuracy of the tractor driving down the row is not that important to the overall aspect of the business, right? But that still comes up once in a while.
so back to just clarity. So one of the issues as a family business advisor that I'm generally drawn into families is because of that transition. So how do you transition from one gen to the other? But also the issue of when you have multiple siblings and some are in a business and not in the business. So this is an interesting dynamic in that your parents had one element and then you took it to, another step further, the two of you, but that left your sister out, but she's still part of the family with the original farm. So
Correct.
did you end up, or do you, or are you going to end up buying the land from your parents, or are you continuing to rent it and then it just becomes part of the estate?
Yeah. So basically, the way that we've done this is we've already divided up the assets. So because we can't, we basically paid out our parents
Hmm.
at this point, but we decided that we would make a longer term contract, basically almost in perpetuity, to pay out our sister a
Yeah.
yearly portion for the rest of her life.
Yep.
Right. Basically, almost as if she held a small share in the company, and she would get
Hmm.
a dividend, basically. Um, the same, obviously, for our parents as well. So we basically pay almost like a dividend to
Right.
sister and parents every year, and they have no more say about the land, right?
Well, you know what? It's fascinating because every family is different and the way they
Yes.
transition is different. So I love hearing the stories about how it works for your family. So it sounds like, it's going pretty well, but you got to tell me, what's the biggest challenge working together? I mean, yes, you have your own lanes, but what's your biggest challenge as brothers working together?
It's a tough one.
Do you
You
want me
know
to,
what?
so we put headphones on him and you can tell me yours separate?
No, there's we don't have massive challenges working together. I
That's
mean, in the
amazing.
end, if somebody has an idea that might work, might not work, we approach everything pretty logically and scientifically so that we figure out, does it work, does it not work? And in the end, if something does not work, then that
And you
goes
go,
through.
nana, nana, nana. I told you.
Well, and in all fairness, right now we don't even have time to argue. Both of us have two young kids, so we're spending every free minute at like hockey tournaments and soccer
Yeah.
club. Like so, it's there's very little time to even have the effort to argue with each other if we got to keep
Yeah.
the business on the rails and the family basically happy. And so there's no.
And
Oh,
so that,
we used to fight all the time in
yeah,
in the past, right? Especially when we
yeah.
were both in the vineyard and stuff like this, and then young guys. But now
Yeah.
it's we have our own families, we have our own parts of the business. As long as the business is doing well, I don't really foresee us having much issues, at least at this point.
And so that leads me to the next question I was going to ask you is about family. And so you both have children. And where do you see this business going with them? Are you going to encourage them to come into the business? I don't know how old they are. I'm assuming they're fairly young.
5 and 2 for me.
Yeah. And then 9 and 11.
Okay, so yours are a little bit older. So then it becomes more complicated because it's two of you and you get along, but the next generation there's four, right? Which
That's
is when a lot of the issues start to happen. So have you talked about that at all? Like your 11-year-old, do they come and hang around? Are they part of the business now?
But we've tried to encourage them to actually come out here a little bit and sort of learn how to. So the youngest one has done actually tours around the facilities with people and showed them where
Oh,
things are,
fun.
which has been
Yeah.
pretty fun. We try to get them to learn a little bit about business by operating a freezy stand for some of the guys that are coming on bikes, for example. That did not
Hmm.
work because We charged them a rental fee, like our parents did us for the stand. We charged them for the input cost, like we had to buy grapes for the freezies, and then people came in and wrecked the whole experience by buying 2 freezies and leaving them a $20 tip and bought the freezies for them.
Oh, oh.
We're
Well,
trying
that's a
to,
pretty good business model. I kind of like
it's
that
amazing, but
model.
we're trying to encourage them to like talk to people and welcome them, ask them what flavors they want, and they're like, "No, what
Yeah.
flavors do you like?" And here's $20 tip for me buying you a freezie. I'm like, "Great, that is
Oh.
exactly what I wanted."
But that's good because I do think it's great when you encourage the next generation, and not all businesses you can encourage the next generation, but it does become a little more complex the deeper you get into
Yeah.
the generations. So tell me a little bit about the wines. We've talked about the business. Tell me a little bit about your wines and where you can find them.
Yeah. So basically, between the lines, we produce everything here and we make everything here and we almost exclusively sell everything here. We
Okay.
do have a little bit that would be exported to Asia, East Asia. We have a little bit that is sold through some restaurants and
Mhm.
online, basically, where we can ship. Um, but I would probably say close to 85, 90% is actually sold through the retail door right here.
Mhm.
Um, if you don't have the luxury to come to Niagara on the Lake, you could order from us online and we
Okay.
would deliver it to you with Canada Post, I believe, at this point. And but we would love to welcome you to the winery because part of the experience of our wines is to be able to taste them like in the cellar, surrounded by the equipment, able to ask questions, how we
Right.
do things. So, like I said, we're not necessarily just in the wine business, but a lot of it is this value add of entertainment and education, right?
Mhm.
Which has worked really, really well. So there are grape to glass tours that you can do. There is cheese and charcuterie where you can sample stuff and see what wines work well together with what types of food.
Nice.
That's sort of the route that we chose for us here. And that actually, back to that question with what the kits are going to do, it actually gives you a lot of flexibility because not all the kits are the same. Some might be a little bit more shy and prefer to work in the cellar, right? And some would rather
For
be,
those who can't see what they're doing, he's pointing at his brother.
and some of us do like to be maybe a little bit more out front with the guests. Some prefer to do the bit. So as we grow, hopefully we get a chance to open up more parts that might work for the family. But we've had this discussion ourselves. We're not going to force them into it.
No,
Right.
no.
If they, like Leon's talking about becoming a veterinarian that loves animals, for example, um, Noah might stay more behind here. I don't really
Well,
know.
maybe you could have a petting zoo on the
Yes,
property.
that's right.
So you talked about the future. What is the future? What is your sort of growth plans?
Yeah. So we're basically looking maybe more at branching out and seeing if our business model or so doesn't work for other wineries. Because oftentimes you do have smaller wineries, but they might not have the level of expertise or the knowledge that we have, right? You might have funds, which surprisingly enough for me now is actually the easiest thing to get,
Oh, wow.
right? Usually funds are not
No,
necessarily the
yeah,
problem,
that's a
right?
good thing.
But it's always a little bit of okay, well, how does this plan actually work? Because you can make any plan in Excel, but
Yeah.
does it actually work in real life? So for us, we were looking a little bit at branching out and helping other wineries grow as well. Between the Lines itself is probably looking a little bit more at events as well,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
To go a little bit more into the education and entertainment side than what we've done in the past.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Winemaking, we've expanded over the last 2 years. The same with the viticulture. We've bought additional land to get us more resources and more grapes, which we're at this point are pretty much set for the next 10 years at least.
Oh, great. So before we end, as I always like to ask for 3 tips when we end, but I do have one question. How did you come up with the name?
So that goes back to the start of the podcast when you had to ask how to pronounce our last name.
Oh, yes.
So when we came up with the name, our last name was on the list for about 10 seconds, and then we took it off and said,
Oh, yeah.
nope, that's not going to work. So instead, we started looking into um, location a little bit more. because there are wineries that are named after their locations, whether it's something with lake in it or if you're close to, I don't know, rivers or ponds or something like this. For our area here, we're actually located on 4 Mile Creek Road, and that is intersected with different roads that are all called lines. So we're located on 4 Mile Creek Road between line 5 and line 6 road. And from that, also our label comes from, or our logo comes from, that the actual logo is a map with 4 Mile Creek Road being in the center and the line 5, line 6 road crossing it. So that our label is our location and the name is exactly where we are.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, we are out of time. I can't believe how fast it goes. I would like to hear more about Between the Lines, but I like to finish every podcast with you to give me sort of your 3 top tips for, in this case, how to be, co-partners with your family. So what are the top 3 things that you would tell other family businesses about being co-partners and family?
3 tips. All right. Well, I suppose the first one is don't throw in the towel if you don't get your way, right? Because you have a lot of people that they think it's easy to walk away, which technically it is, but then you got nothing, right? So that might be it. Like don't give up right away. Try to see the other person's point of view. That would be a big one for me.
Great advice.
So the ability to compromise.
Yeah, to a degree. Like you don't have to compromise. You can keep duking it out the next day, but like don't walk away and say that's it. Maybe sleep on it and then come back the next day or so.
Mhm.
That's just there.
What else?
Don't have an ego.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Oh, yes. Great tips. Good
Yeah,
advice.
tough one too is like if, for example, since we work very different, almost different shifts sometimes, we might not see each other for 2 days or so. Often things come up is like, so who does the most work? I'm like, well, it's not really fair to say because it also fluctuates, right?
Right.
There are certain seasons that are extremely busy for winemaking. There might be certain seasons that are really busy for everything else. So jealousy, for example, is not a good thing to have in the business. But that doesn't mean that you could just sit back and do nothing, right? It's
Absolutely.
you so don't be jealous. Figure out a way to compromise, for example. And in the end, like what helped us, especially in this industry, which is very tough to get in, it's very hard to survive in the beginning, was you got to have a little bit of grit to get through it, right? Like again, don't throw in the towel, right?
Right.
Just
Right. And that's great. When I just have one last question
yeah,
is how do you rank who's the president, who's the CEO, how do you determine who that is?
yeah, we don't care.
Yeah, irrelevant for us.
Perfect. I love that answer.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And what is your website so our listeners can go take a look?
Yeah, go to betweenthelineswinery.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. If you like this episode, subscribe to the Business of Family podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can also find Blue Roots on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. On the next show, I'll be back with another amazing guest who will inspire you with their family business insights. Until then, take care and keep it in the family. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, tax, investment, or insurance advice. Before acting on any advice, please contact your personal or company advisors.